The Pine Barrens of southern New Jersey stretched endlessly before the small, weathered cabin where I spent my childhood. The dense forest, with its gnarled pines and sandy trails, was both a playground and a labyrinth, a place where the air carried the scent of resin and mystery. My name is Lucas, and I grew up in that isolated corner of the world, in a house dwarfed by towering trees and surrounded by whispers of the unknown. Most of my early memories are warm, racing my younger sister Ellie through the underbrush, building forts from fallen branches, or wading in the cedar-stained streams that ran like veins through the barrens. But some memories cling to me like damp moss, cold and unsettling, even now, decades later. When I was 6, my parents' marriage began to fray. Mom, a part-time nurse at the local clinic, was perpetually exhausted, her eyes shadowed from long shifts and the weight of keeping our family afloat. Dad worked as a mechanic at a garage 20 miles away, his hands always stained with grease, his temper short from the grind of long hours and low pay. Their arguments filled our small cabin, sharp and relentless, spilling through the thin walls no matter how tightly I pressed my hands over my ears. They fought about money, about Dad's late nights at the garage, about whose turn it was to drive me and Ellie to school. I'd lie in my bunk bed, Ellie snoring softly below, my stomach twisting with fear that our family would splinter. I'd heard stories at school about kids whose parents split up, kids who bounced between houses, their lives packed into duffel bags. The thought of losing the only home I'd ever known kept me awake, my eyes fixed on the ceiling, tracing the knots in the pine wood. One winter night, when the wind howled through the barrens and frost etched patterns on my window, I woke to a strange sensation, a light, insistent tug on my sleeve. My room was dark, the only light coming from the faint glow of my star-shaped nightlight plugged into the corner. I blinked, groggy, and saw a figure standing by my bed. It looked like Mom. Her slender frame, her long braid swinging slightly as she moved. She wore a pale sweater, one I recognized from her closet, though the darkness obscured her face. She didn't speak, but her hand gestured toward the door, a slow, deliberate motion that felt both familiar and wrong. Confused, I slid out of bed, my bare feet hitting the cold floorboards. Ellie was still asleep, her breathing steady, oblivious to the figure's presence. The air in the room felt heavy, like the moment before a storm. The figure moved toward the window, which was cracked open, letting in a draft that made the curtains flutter. That was strange. Our windows were heavy, double-paned to keep out the Jersey chill, and I'd never been strong enough to open them without Dad's help. The figure paused, half-turned, and beckoned again, her silhouette framed against the faint moonlight. I hesitated, glancing back at Ellie, but something urged me forward, a mix of curiosity and trust. I climbed onto the radiator beneath the window, struggling to hoist myself over the sill. The wood was splintered, rough against my palms, and the cold night air stung my face. The figure was already outside, her form partially swallowed by the shadows of the pines. She motioned for me to follow, her movements fluid, yet oddly mechanical, like a puppet on strings. I don't remember much after that. The next thing I knew, I was waking up on the frozen ground, curled in a patch of pine needles just beyond our front porch. Dawn was breaking, the sky a pale gray, and my pajamas were damp with frost. My fingers ached with cold, and there were shallow scratches on my knees, as if I'd stumbled through the underbrush. My parents' voices pulled me back to reality, frantic, shouting my name. Mom found me first, her face pale as she dropped to her knees, wrapping me in her coat. "Lucas, what are you doing out here?" she cried, her hands checking me for injuries. Dad was right behind her, his eyes wide with panic. I mumbled something about Mom leading me outside, about following her through the window. Their faces froze, exchanging a look I couldn't decipher. "Sweetie?" Mom said, her voice trembling. "I was in bed all night. I didn't come to your room." Dad carried me inside, and they questioned me gently, trying to piece together what had happened. The window was still open, the latch undisturbed, no signs of tampering. They chalked it up to sleepwalking, a one-off caused by stress. But I saw the doubt in their eyes. For weeks, they checked my window every night, and Dad eventually installed a lock that required a key. The incident faded, buried under the routines of childhood, but it left a shadow in my mind, a question I couldn't answer. Who or what had I followed that night? By the time I was 13, life had settled. My parents had worked through their rough patch, thanks to a new job for Dad at a warehouse and counseling sessions at the community center. They were happier, laughing more, even taking weekend drives to the shore. But I was struggling. Middle school was a battlefield. Cliques formed, and I didn't fit into any of them. I was lanky, awkward, more interested in sketching in my notebook than joining the basketball team. The few friends I had were drifting away, caught up in sports or crushes, leaving me feeling like an outsider in my own life. At home, Mom and Dad were busy. Mom with her nursing shifts, Dad with his new role overseeing inventory. When I tried to talk to them about the kids who mocked my drawings or the loneliness gnawing at me, their responses were distracted. "Not now, Lucas," or "Can we talk later?" became their refrain. I felt invisible, like a ghost haunting my own house. One October evening, with the air crisp and the barrens ablaze with red and gold, I decided to make them notice me. It wasn't a rational plan, just the desperate idea of a kid who felt ignored. I'd run away. Not forever, just long enough to scare them, to make them realize how much they'd miss me. I'd heard stories about kids hitchhiking to Atlantic City or hiding out in the Barrens, and in my mind, it seemed simple. I'd spend a day in the woods, then come home to tearful apologies and promises of family game nights. I packed a backpack with essentials, a peanut butter sandwich, a bottle of root beer, my sketch pad, a pencil, and a flashlight. I waited until 4:30 a.m. when the house was silent and slipped out the back door, the hinges creaking softly. The Barrens were quiet, the pre-dawn air thick with mist. My sneakers crunched on the sandy path as I headed toward a clearing I knew, about a mile from home. It was a spot where I'd often sketched, a wide circle of pines surrounding a massive cedar tree. I settled against its trunk, my breath visible in the chilly air, and pulled out my sketch pad. I drew for hours, losing myself in charcoal outlines of the forest, imagining I was a lone explorer in some uncharted land. By mid-morning, boredom crept in. My sandwich was gone, my root beer half drunk, and the thrill of my plan was fading. I climbed the cedar tree, but the branches were too thin to support me higher up. I tossed pine cones at a stump, pretending it was a target. But the longer I stayed, the more the woods felt oppressive, the silence heavy with unseen eyes. Around noon, I heard footsteps, deliberate, human steps, coming from deeper in the Barrens, not from the direction of home. My heart lifted, thinking it might be Dad searching for me. "Dad!" I called, standing up. The footsteps stopped abruptly, and the forest went still, not even a bird chirping. I waited, my pulse quickening, but nothing moved. Unsettled, I packed my things and wandered a bit, staying within sight of the clearing. I followed a narrow stream for a while, its water the color of weak tea, then looped back to my tree. By early afternoon, my flashlight's batteries died, leaving me irritated and restless. I sat down again, facing the deeper woods, and started sketching to calm my nerves. That's when I saw her. About 30 feet away, at the edge of the clearing, stood a figure that looked like Mom. She wore her green scarf, the one she always wrapped around her neck on chilly days, but her face was shadowed, obscured by the angle of the light. Her posture was off, too rigid, her arms hanging limply, like they weren't quite attached right. I called out, "Mom?" She nodded, a slow, jerky motion, and beckoned me with a hand that moved too fast, like a glitch in a video game. Relief mixed with unease as I stood, brushing pine needles off my jeans. I started talking, spilling my frustrations, how I felt ignored, how I just wanted them to care. I was gonna come back, I swear, I said, my voice cracking. I needed you to see me. The figure didn't respond, just turned and walked into the woods, glancing back to gesture me forward. I followed, my sneakers sinking into the soft earth, but something felt wrong. She moved too quickly, always just out of reach, her scarf fluttering like a flag. The trees grew denser, the air cooler, and the path unfamiliar. Brambles snagged my jeans, leaving scratches on my shins. "Mom, slow down," I called, jogging to keep up. "Where are we going?" She didn't answer, just kept moving, her silhouette flickering through the pines like a mirage. Doubt gnawed at me. Why wasn't she talking? Why was she leading me deeper instead of home? I was so focused on her that I didn't notice the ground sloping sharply downward. My foot caught on a root, and I stumbled, sliding down a steep embankment into a shallow gully. I hit the bottom hard, rocks digging into my palms, my breath knocked out of me. Pain shot through my ankle, and a warm trickle of blood ran down my arm from a cut. I lay there, gasping, the world spinning. When I could breathe again, I checked myself. Bruised, scratched, but nothing broken. The gully was narrow, its sides slick with mud, the bottom littered with stones and dead leaves. I didn't recognize this place. The barrens were vast, but I'd never been this far, never seen this gully before. I called for Mom, my voice echoing off the earthen walls. No answer. I tried climbing out, but the mud crumbled under my hands, sending me sliding back down. My ankle throbbed, making each attempt harder. Panic set in as I shouted for my parents, my voice growing hoarse. I waited, listening for any sign of them. Nothing but the rustle of leaves and the distant cry of a hawk. Tears stung my eyes as I realized how lost I was. I limped along the gully, hoping to find a shallower spot to climb out. After what felt like hours, I found a section where roots jutted from the earth, offering handholds. I pulled myself up, my arms shaking, and collapsed onto the forest floor. The woods were unrecognizable, a maze of pines and underbrush. The sun was low, casting long shadows that twisted the trees into strange shapes. I picked a direction and walked, calling out until my throat burned. As dusk fell, the barrens turned alien, the darkness swallowing the familiar. My flashlight was useless, its batteries long dead. Exhausted, I sank against a tree, my body aching, my mind racing with fear. I must have dozed off because when I woke, the darkness was absolute, and I wasn't alone. I was sitting on something or someone. Cold limbs pressed against my back like ice through my jacket. A sharp, claw-like touch grazed my neck, slow and deliberate, sending a shiver through me. I froze, my breath shallow, and looked up. The figure looming over me had Mom's scarf, her braid, but its face, God, its face was wrong. No eyes, no nose, just a wide, lipless mouth, stretched into a grotesque grin, the skin smooth and pale as bone. I screamed, scrambling away, my back slamming into the tree. The figure tilted its head, the grin widening, then vanished into the dark. I sat there, heart pounding, eyes straining for any sign of it. Then, from the distance, I heard Dad's voice, gruff, unmistakable, calling my name. At first, I didn't trust it, but it came again, closer, with Mom's voice joining in. "Lucas, stay there," I shouted back, my voice raw, and kept calling until flashlights pierced the darkness. My parents appeared, along with a park ranger and 2 volunteers, their faces pale with relief and fear. Mom pulled me into a crushing hug, sobbing, while Dad gripped my shoulder, muttering, "You're okay? You're okay?" The ranger wrapped a blanket around me, and I babbled apologies, explaining my stupid plan, mentioning the figure that looked like Mom. They exchanged glances, but didn't press me. The ranger led us back, a 2-hour trek through the barrens to our cabin. At home, medics patched me up, treating my cuts and sprained ankle. The police asked gentle questions, noting how lucky I was to be found. That night, as I lay in bed, my parents sat with me, their faces drawn. I told them everything, the figure at 6, the one in the woods, the faceless thing that held me. Mom clutched her cross necklace and Dad's jaw tightened. They didn't dismiss me, but I saw the unease in their eyes. They made me promise never to wander the barrens alone, to talk to them if I felt ignored. I kept that promise. We moved a year later to a town closer to the coast, when Dad got a promotion. Before we left, I overheard Mom talking to a neighbor about the barrens, about hikers who'd vanished, kids who'd wandered off and never returned. Some were found, disoriented, miles from where they started. Others weren't. I don't know what I saw in those woods, what wore my mother's shape to lure me deeper. But I know it wasn't human. And I know it wanted me lost. Maybe was. If there's anything to learn from this, it's this. Don't run from your problems, not into the wild where things wait in the shadows. And if something calls you into the Pine Barrens, don't follow.